Must have somewhere to go. I'm getting it at 5 after 11. Y'all want out of here early today. What God has in store for you. Hebrews chapter number 11, verse number 39 says, all these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. Yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us. I want you to think about that. No matter what you're thinking, your plans are, or what's on the horizon, or what's in your life now, God always has something better in mind for you and for us than you could ever imagine. I think Joseph is probably in the Bible one of the ones that demonstrates this quality and this principle more than anybody else, more than any other character. And right there in Genesis chapter number 37, in those first 6 verses, you're going to learn that Joseph was the younger brother, the youngest kid. And as you read those verses, it tells you that he was the favorite kid. Out of all of his brothers, he was the favorite of his dad. And his dad gave him a coat of many colors. And because he was so favored by his dad, all of his other brothers hated him. And they just wanted to get rid of him. So the first thing they do is they throw him down inside of a pit. It was actually inside of a well, and there was no water down there or nothing down there. And they winded up coming up with this plan that they were going to tell his dad that he must have been attacked by an animal. And here we've got his coat here with blood on it. And they were going to try to get away with it by just leaving him down in the pit. But they were sitting there having dinner, and they saw a caravan coming by, and they thought, well, no sense in leaving him down there in the pit. We'll just sell him as a slave. And they did that. They sold him as a slave, and he winded up in the house of a guy named Potiphar. And we're going to pick that up in down there in the 3rd column in Genesis chapter number 39. It says, when Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. This is what I want you to center in on. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded. Excuse me. He succeeded. Oh, I lost my place. He succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything that he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge over his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly. His crops and his livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. When Joseph was there, he didn't worry about anything except what to eat. But we know it doesn't take long, if you'll read in Genesis chapter number 39, that Potiphar's wife laid her eyes on Joseph and she wanted him. But Joseph wouldn't fall for the bait. He wouldn't be with her, so she winded up tearing his garment one day and accusing him of doing something he didn't do. So then Joseph was thrown in prison by Potiphar because he was enraged that he would try to take advantage of his wife. But when he winds up there And on the back side of your sheet, or at the bottom of your sheet, it says, Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph, threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But notice again, but the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything, because Joseph, over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Now you think about your plans, you think about your dreams. And as you think about what God has in store for you, even in the life of Joseph, we'll see that what God had in store for him was even more than you could see with your eye. If you was just to look at the story and look at the circumstances and look at the obstacles, you would be thinking at that present moment, there's no way God is going to bring something good out of this. There's no way that God has something better in store than what Joseph had previously. But every step of the way, we see that God was not only in control, he was actually in the background, orchestrating everything. And everything that Joseph did, the Lord was with him, and he caused him to have favor everywhere he went. And Joseph always rose to the top by being a man of character and by being a man who made choices that pleased God. Now you think about your life, you think about what it is that you're actively engaged in at the present moment, and just ask yourself, is this what God has for me? Are these my plans and my agenda? Have I completely looked to God and said, God, what do you have in store for me? Maybe your life's been turned upside down. Maybe you went through some kind of valley of sorrow, some kind of valley of defeat and discouragement, and you're thinking there's no way that you'll ever be able to get back up on top again, much less rise again. And what I want you to see today is that God has something wonderful in store for you. I read a story this week about a dad who did a lot of traveling, and he had two little boys at home, and every time he would come home from one of his traveling adventures, he would always bring his little two boys a gift. You know how it is every time you bring gifts back home, it doesn't take long for kids to, they look right past you and they want to know what you got. So one day he comes back home and he forgot to get a gift. So the dad says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you both up to the store and I'm going to let y'all pick out whatever it is that you want. And as soon as the kids, if you've went shopping with any kids from a young age up to the preteen, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. As soon as the boys walked in, the first thing they saw was all of this candy that was over there on the counter. So he said, that's what we want. That's what we want. We want candy. Yeah, we want candy. And the dad said, let's just keep looking. So they go to the toy department, and immediately they find a cowboy suit and guns and a hat, and this is what we want, Dad. This is what we want. He said, let's just keep looking. And then they go to the sporting goods section, and over there they see a basketball, and they start dribbling around and playing and throwing the ball around. This is what we want, Dad. This is what we want, a basketball. And he said, let's just keep looking. And they walked around the corner, and there sat two brand new shiny bicycles that these boys had always dreamed of. And the dad says, how about we get those? And they were turning flips and all excited. But you know what? That story, even though we can relate to it, relates to us. Because how many times do we settle for the candy, or settle for the cowboy suit, or settle for the basketball when God has so much more in store for us? Something that is so much greater than you could ever ask for, that you could ever imagine, that you could ever comprehend, or that you can ever conceive in your mind. Now, I want to say a good bit here in this introduction, so just follow me. It's kind of like a little monologue of just stuff that I just jotted down. We need to realize that He has blessings for us, that God has plans for us, and they're not just wonderful plans, they're wow plans. They're plans with a purpose. They're plans that if you will just let God have you, they will be plans that you desire and that you want. And all of these plans are going to have a label on them, and it's going to have your name on it, and it's going to be packaged up just for you. Because God made you like He made no one else. And He's got stuff for you that He has for no one else. And if you ever get a hold of what God has in store for you, you're going to love it. You're going to embrace it, and you're going to delight in it, and you're going to desire it. His plans always breathe life and resurrection into your life. No matter what it is that you're going through, they always give you life, and they breathe life into you. His plans liberate you from bondage of things that are holding you back and holding you down. His plans let you loose to be able to live the life that God intended for you to live. Kind of what we were singing about in the first song. To be able to live that good life that only a good God can bring into your life. Now think about how God created you. God created you to be a winner, not a loser. He created you to be a conqueror. He created you and me with a spirit to be able to rise above anything that would come against us, to be able to push through any adversity that would come our way, to be able to be an overcomer and a conqueror, to be able to rule in your life, and to be able to be on top of circumstances and struggles and difficulties in your life. God created you in His image, and He created you to know Him. He created you to desire Him. He created you to want Him. But He also created you with choice. He created you with free will. And even though He created you to know Him, He wants you to want to know Him. He wants you to make that decision out of your free will that, yes, this is what's missing in my life, and this is what I want in my life, and this is what I desire in my life. And I choose you, God. I choose Jesus. I choose life, and I choose willingly. He also created you with a cause. He gave you a cause. He gave you a plan. You're not here by accident. You're here and you have a cause. You have a purpose, and you have something out there for you. But He also created you with creativity. God made you, and He made you you. So you need to be you, and you need to be the best you that you can be, because God made you you to be productive and to be useful. He created you to be able to build relationships and to be able to have relationships. He created you to be a companion to someone, a friend to someone, to have meaningful relationships that make your life stronger, that makes other people stronger by just being in your life. But He created you also to be a person of influence, to be His child, to shine, to share, to serve, to surrender, to submit, to sing, to shout, to just let your life just be a beaming light of encouragement and edification to everyone that crosses your path. And you know what? You don't have to be afraid, because Isaiah 41:13 says that he will take hold of your right hand, and you don't have to fear, because he's going to be there to help you and to strengthen you. And this morning, as we look at Joseph, we're going to see that his life demonstrates these qualities. That Joseph had a cause, that he was created with creativity, that he had something that God had put in him and had hand-stitched in him, that no matter what the circumstances were, Joseph always rose to the top, even in the most difficult circumstances. Number one, you're a special person. That's straight from me to you. Straight from God to you. You're a special person. Did you know that? Maybe you haven't been told you're special recently. I'm not talking about special as in special. I'm talking about you're special. You are special. No matter what you've done, no matter what you haven't done, you're special. And you're special to God. No matter how dark the clouds might be, no matter how depressing your circumstances may be, no matter how diligent your critics are, you need to remember that you are special. You are special when you feel like it, and you're special when you don't feel like it. You're loved, cared for. As Cindy said, as they learned in Sunday school, that God is pursuing you with blessings, that he's chasing after you. And that's literally the theme of what we're talking about today, is what God has in store. No matter where you're at in life, you need to embrace that God has something in store for you. And it could be dark and cloudy, and it could be the midnight hour. People could be coming against you. Your circumstances could be overwhelming. You could be facing someone's wrath of something like Joseph that you don't deserve or didn't deserve. You could have lost your job when you've done everything right. But you need to realize that you are special, and because you are special, God has something in store for you that is better than whatever it is that may be slipping through your fingers at the present moment. Let's think about Joseph. First of all, he was different from others. Point A. He was different from others. And you know what? You're different from others too. Joseph was different because of his coat. He had a coat of many colors. I don't know what it looked like, but it had to be something fancy and something that his brothers did not like whatsoever. But you know what really made Joseph different was his character and his choices. That's really what made Joseph different than everyone else. We live in especially our and I've got one in middle school now, and I've got some that have already went through that stage, and I know firsthand just by watching them that they just want to fit in. They don't want to be the center. They don't want to stick out. They just want to blend in, and they just want to fit in. And kids today will do just about whatever they got to do to make sure that they fit in with everybody else. Now, that could mean them making choices that are okay, or it could mean them making choices that are bad. But what happens when we want to fit in is we wind up conforming to the environment around us. And we need to realize that we are different. We are different just because we are children of God. And it's okay to be different. It's okay to be you. It's okay for you to look at yourself, what you need to do, and you need to accept yourself. You need to accept yourself as God has accepted you, and you need to discover yourself, and you need to be yourself, because that's who God made you. Now, He made you, and some people say, well, that's just the way I am when we're trying to justify something bad. No, that's just the way you are because you're a sinner and you're choosing to sin. But now that you have Jesus, you can take that matter of fact, this is the way I am, and God can take that trait and He can channel it in a positive direction. Just think about that mouth you've got now. Just think about if God anointed that mouth and life came out of that mouth and Jesus came out of that mouth, think about the difference He could make in your life. Think about the difference you could make in other people's lives. So we all got mouths. Some people can use it in a very destructive way, but God can take it and He can use it in a very productive way. So, okay, He was different from others. Second of all, not only are we different, we are designed uniquely. When I think about Joseph and I look at him and I think about, okay, what was his gift? What was in his DNA? As I look at it, I believe Joseph was in the fabric of who he was a leader. And no matter where Joseph was put, no matter if he was put there unfairly or if he was put there unjust, because he was a leader and he chose to channel that to God, God took that he had put in him and created him, and He always elevated him. He always lifted him up, and he was able to overcome all the obstacles and wind up leading in the middle of the obstacle, wind up being the leader. Think about it. He's in prison. And because he rises and finds favor with the warden, he's in charge of the prisoners, and he's one of them. And everywhere he went, not only did he rise to the top and become a leader, but God showed him favor, but not just him favor. Everywhere Joseph went, other people were blessed. And the reason why they were blessed is because Joseph accepted who he was, and he was being who he was, and he was channeling all who he was towards the one that made him that way, and God was blessing him in a unique, dynamic way. Another thing I think about Joseph is he was a God pleaser. He didn't really think about pleasing other people. Can you think about trying to please 11 other brothers that hated you? He couldn't do it. So what did he do? He just pleased God. And because of that, he was okay. And he had God's approval. And you know what? If we'll just live for God's approval, that's all that matters. Everything else, just let it be volume and noise in the background. Because if you have God's approval, you're going to be okay. God's going to protect you and guard you, and He's going to bring you through to the next part of your journey. And that's what He did with Joseph. He was different. He was designed. Third of all, he was directed by God. See, when you live for God's approval, this goes for everybody. When you live for God's approval, He's always in the background orchestrating all the events and everything that is happening in your life, and He is providing direction. I know you look at your life, and I look at my life sometimes, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. Sometimes we can look at a circumstance, or we can look at something that we're in the middle of, and it looks like we're headed downward. It looks like we're regressing. It looks like we're going to have less. It looks like we're losing. It looks like the enemy is winning. And just if you just look on the surface, the same way with Joseph, it looked like he was headed downward. And I know maybe that's where you got your eyes today. Maybe you feel like you're headed towards a crash. You're headed to the bottom of the dungeon and you just haven't landed yet. But you know what? If you're living for God's approval, you can know that He's orchestrating everything. And I never quote that verse when somebody is in the middle of trauma, but we can know that all things are going to work together for good. And I guarantee you, if you will look and lean towards what God has in store, I don't care what it is in your life, how traumatic it is, how much sorrow they may be, how much pain there may be, God will turn it to something good and productive and useful. Be directed by God. Number 2, not only are you a special person, you have a special plan. Now think about Joseph. How did all this start with Joseph? We didn't read the first little part, but Joseph was a dreamer. Now we're talking about actually dreaming dreams. And he did. He dreamed a dream. And the dream that he dreamed was from God. And that's when he told his brothers. His brothers already didn't like him. But when he dreamed this dream and he told his brothers about it, basically the dream was this. They were all going to fall down in humility and he was going to be lifted up. And they were going to have to submit to him. And at the present moment, that's the last thing they wanted to do. But it was a dream speaking of something that was in the future. And we're going to see that because the Lord was with Joseph, he kept rising, and he kept rising, and he kept rising. And when you come to the end of Joseph's reign of rising to the top, he's going to be over all of Egypt. He's going to be in charge of it all. And because he was in tune with God, he could see a famine that was coming. God let him know about this famine way in advance. So Egypt prepared for it and got ready for it. So now the whole world was coming to Egypt to be able to find food and to buy food, because Joseph, being the leader he was, prepared for it, planned for it. So therefore, his brothers in need of food in the midst of a famine had to come and bow before Joseph. They didn't even know it was their brother at first until he revealed it to them. So you got a special plan. But you know what? Joseph had to believe that he had a special plan. He had to believe the dream. And you know what? You have to believe it. Even in Joseph, most of the time it looked like the dream was never going to come true. It looked like there was never any kind of way that anything that God said was going to take place in his life. But you know, all it takes is just a moment, and God can turn it all around. I've always used the theme, I know Dr. Phil uses it. This can be a changing day in your life. It can be a changing day in your life because you have the power of what? You have the power of choice. You have the ability to make some decisions in your life to where it could be a changing day. I was thinking, you remember the story in John chapter 11 where Lazarus had died and Jesus was away, and he didn't come when the sisters called for him, and Lazarus wound up passing away, and he had already been dead for a few days by the time Jesus had arrived. But think about everybody in the community that morning. Everybody didn't know that Jesus was coming that day, but there was the biggest crowd at Mary and Martha's house on that day that Jesus showed up. And think about everybody when they got up that morning. Think about what was on their mind. What was on their mind was the death of Lazarus. So they were thinking about comforting Martha and Mary, and thinking about going there and crying with them and praying with them and hugging them and weeping with them. So that's what was on their mind when they woke up that morning, that we're going to have to comfort people today in the midst of their death and their pain. But did you know that even though they got up that day thinking they were going to be comforting people in a time of death, they actually winded up celebrating life instead of death? Why? Because Jesus showed up and raised Lazarus from the dead. So whatever it is you started out the day thinking, just know that Jesus can step in at any moment and breathe life and totally transform whatever it is you thought you were going to have to do, whatever it is you thought you were going to have to face that day. He can show up and totally turn it in a totally different direction. Because not only can it be a changing day in your life, it can be a changing moment in your life. I know you're just like me. You wanted things to change in your life in the past, and you're always like thinking, this could be the day. And you know what? It could be the day. That's why you need to be looking always to Jesus and always be looking for Jesus, because this could be the day that he changes something drastically in you or drastically in your circumstances. Now think about when you're thinking about God's special plan for your life. There's always 4 words I've used, and they all start with the letter E. First of all, there's enlightenment. And this is the part to where you have to just kind of be in tune with God. It's the mystical part of it. It's the part that we have the hardest time latching on to, so therefore we don't ever get to the rest of it. But first of all, there's that enlightening moment to where God is showing you maybe something that he has for your life, something that he wants you to do with your life. But I never want you to think that it's a mathematic formula that you got to come up with, because it's not. It's God just turning on the light bulb and you knowing and sensing that it's God, and you're stepping in that direction. So not only enlightenment, but then second of all, there's enjoyment. Whatever it is that God enlightens you on, when you do it, you enjoy it. You think about what I said in my introduction, if you missed it, that when you do and you participate in your life in what God has in store for you, you will not only delight in it, you will desire it. And that means that even on this side of things that you haven't done for God yet, and you think, how in the world am I going to actually desire that and delight in that? You can't conceive it because you haven't stepped in faith towards that yet. But once you begin to step in faith towards that and begin to embrace God in that, you're going to see that you will actually enjoy it and desire it and delight in it. And then third of all, there's enlightenment, enjoyment, and then there's encouragement. When you do what it is that God tells you to do, not only will you enjoy it, others will be encouraged by it. So it's kind of like, well, this is great. I get to enjoy what I do, and now other people are going to be encouraged, blessed, and touched by what it is that you're doing. So when God enlightens you and you do it and you enjoy it, and others say that encouraged them, you definitely know you're on the right track. And then fourth of all, there is enablement. There is God's grace and strength that is at work in your life, allowing you to be able to do what He has enlightened you that you're supposed to be doing. I've always told y'all that I don't want to do one tomorrow, but God just gave me a gift of being able to do funerals and to be able to be a part of those. And I know it and I sense it because of how I know that God uses me in those moments. And a lot of times you only see it as people come up to you and they're grieving and their hearts are broken. And it's not that you've done anything yourself, but you got up and you spoke the word of God and you spoke life. And it blessed them and it encouraged them. And they come and they tell you that. And it encourages you because you know that it was because of God's divine enablement that you were able to do what God had in store for you on that day. And I don't enjoy it in that way, but you enjoy it in the sense that you know that you're doing what God wants you to do at that moment. And it's not only blessing you, it's blessing other people and touching other people. Number 3, in this journey of you embracing what God has for you, you're going to have some special problems along the way. There's no way to get where God is taking you without problems. No way for you to get from point A to point B. And this is not only problems, but special problems. Because you can look at your life, and if you're not careful, you can start to compare your life with somebody else's life, and that's the worst thing that you could possibly ever do. There's no good that's ever going to come out of that. Because first of all, you don't know somebody else's life. You just know what you've seen. So you're going to have special problems, and you're going to have darkness along the way and difficulties along the way that you've just got to know that just because that came into your life doesn't mean that you were disconnected from God. Because Joseph had these things, and if he would have let the flesh work, he would have said, I had to do something wrong. There has to be a disconnect somewhere. But Joseph was only guilty of one thing, and that was following God and loving God and being a person of character. But yet he faced a lot of unfair things in his life. And you know what? You're going to face a lot of unfair things in your life. But if you'll look at all of this mistreatment that Joseph went through, notice what happened in the midst of all of it. In the midst of every one of these events, he's blessed and he's taken further than he would have been if he didn't go through the trauma. So just know that in this life, you're going to have special problems. And you're going to go through things that the person sitting next to you might not go through. But don't think that what you're going through that nobody else has went through. Because everybody's going through something, and there's always somebody next to you that's got it worse than what you've got. So don't look at lives and don't look at people. Look to God. Because in this world, you're going to have tribulation. And there's only one way to overcome it. There's only one way to defeat it and one way to win, and that's through Jesus. And He will take that in your life, and eventually you will see what He has in store for you as you've went through it and you've come to the other side of it. You will see the goodness of God and the grace of God. 3 things you need to always remember as a part of this. always remember God is guiding you. Always remember He's on the ship and He is guiding the ship. Now, the enemy's going to tell you a lot of stuff. He's going to tell you you're a nobody, you're a nothing, you're a nuisance, you're not doing this right, you're not noticed, you're not needed. The enemy puts all those things in your mind. And you know what? If you dwell there, there's nothing good there. Nothing good at all there. You have to dwell in the realm of knowing that God is guiding you. And it might be tough and it might be hard, but today is going to be a changing day in your life. And you're going to get up today and you're going to exercise choice and will today, and you're going to follow God today. He's guiding you. Second of all, He's not only guiding you, He's guarding you. He's protecting you. He's encamped His angelic realm around you. And most of all, through the problems, He's growing you. That's the only way to grow, is you got to have some adversity in your life. And you know what? What normally happens, some of you retired people that are a little bit older that's already raised your kids will probably say amen to that. When you get to a point in your life to where you've got everything, like retirement, everything seems to be locked in and everything seems to be good, you know what gives you grief then? Your kids and your grandkids. There's always something else in line that you're always going to be facing. There's always going to be problems, and there's always going to be struggles. Number 4, you are a special person, but you also have a special person with you. And it's not me, and it's not the person sitting next to you, it's God. There's one thing about Joseph as you read chapters 37 to 39, that one statement that is repeated over and over and over, and that is, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. You know, God is the only one that can take tragedy and temptation and torment and trouble and turn all of those into triumphs. He's the only one that can do it. He's a very, very special companion to have right by your side. To think about the one that created you, that loves you more than anybody will ever love you, loves you, cares for you more than anybody will ever care for you. He's right there with you. He's right there with you. When you can see it and when you can't, He's near. And the Bible says all we got to do is draw near. And that literally doesn't mean that He's off somewhere. No, He's there. But when you draw near, He draws near to you. That just literally means when you draw near and your focus is there, you're really going to lock in and sense His presence in your life. But He's there, and He's there all the time. And He's the only one that can do what Psalms 30 says, that He can turn weeping and mourning into celebrating and dancing. And He can do it whenever He chooses to step in and to bring resurrection and life. The last thing I want to say this morning is Joseph had every reason to quit. He had every reason to give up. But he never stopped believing, he never stopped trusting, and he never stopped dreaming. So no matter where you're at in your journey, don't give up. Don't give up. I know not just in life, but there's one thing that I know even with our church and our church family. You know, we like to see activity. We like to see things like we want to feel things, we want to see things. I do too. I do. I want to feel and I want to see, and I want to sense, and I want God to move. But sometimes you get into those moments to where it just seems like there's just a lot of adversity, and we face that here at our church. But there's one thing we can't do, and that's quit. I know I told Cindy the other day, and I just needed to say it out loud to make myself feel better, is, you know, I've been here for almost 20 years, and I've seen our church go through a lot, and this has been the most difficult leg along the journey, to where even myself, I wonder, okay, God, where are you? Where are you, God? Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it, or is this it? Now I know anytime I say, "Are you gonna do it?" or "This is it," I know that's the devil. He is gonna do it, and it is it. And we need to start approaching everything with a mind that's full of life, with words that are full of life. And it's easy to fall into that trap when you're going through adversity of gloom and doom and this, that, and the other. But let's just lift our eyes towards the hills from whence cometh our help, because that's where help is. And I'll be honest with you, I wished I could stand up here today and tell you in your life, do these 3 things and your life will turn around and you will see it today. I wished I could say we could do these 3 things as a church today and we would see God show up this afternoon. You know what? We might. We might. But we just have to keep trusting, and we just have to keep believing, and we just have to keep pushing, because God created us to be winners, conquerors, to push through, to overcome, and to ultimately come out on top with all the glory, praise, and honor being lifted up to God. Let's stand.